Kia ora, Heath. How are you today?
Good, thanks, Esther. How are you?
Yeah, great, thank you. Where are you joining us from today?
So I'm just calling from my office in Lake Hayes Estate today. Miserable day outside, but that's all right.
It is a miserable day. So which ward are you standing in, Heath, as a councillor this time?
Standing as one of the nominees or candidates for the Arrowtown Kawara Ward.
Excellent. So you've got a bit of competition there.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you've been in council before, so maybe just let us know what that looks like and also what you do when you're not a councillor.
Yeah. So I was the last sole Arrowtown Ward councillor, the 2019 training with yourself, actually, Esther. That's where we first met, really. We got to work together. And I stepped away at the start of this last training just for some capacity issues in my personal and professional life, which I feel have potentially subsided, but we'll see how that goes. But I live in Arrowtown with my wife and my two daughters. I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. I was born and bred in Southland, spent a bit of time studying and travelling. I've been back in New Zealand for coming up 8 years now, and been back in the Queenstown Lakes District since our return home. In my spare time, I run an accounting practice out of Lake Hayes Estate, or at Kawara Park here in the entrance to Lake Hayes Estate, called Moore Markhams. And we're part of a bigger firm, Moore Markhams Otago. We have a large office in Dunedin as well. Right,
okay. And so you were a councillor for one term?
That's right.
And since then, you've also been involved with council on one of the committees. Can you just touch on that as well, please?
Yeah, so I became an independent on the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee. I'm actually the independent chair, deputy chair on that committee. So I've been keeping my hand in to a bit of local government and political positioning through that committee over the last 3 years.
Okay, so maybe we'll delve into more of that stuff later. So what made you decide to run again? Because obviously you just said that you kind of stepped away because of capacity issues, but clearly it still interests you. So what made you decide to run?
Yeah, good question. I'm still coming to grips with whether or not it was the right decision or not. But as the deadline was approaching for candidates to get their applications in, there weren't that many names on the list. The last time I was a councillor, I was elected unopposed, which was a good way to get in. But looking at the list and looking at the names that were there, especially in the Queenstown ward at the time, there were some good names that I thought would be good to work with. And because we were short, I started letting my arm get a little bit twisted by different people around the community and in council. And the more I sort of thought about it, and the more I talked myself into it, my position, my personal position especially, has probably changed in the last 3 years. 3 years ago, I had a 1-year-old baby and a 4-year-old, pretty full on. I had just spent 3 years neglecting my professional business, and kind of needed time. It was getting away from me, and it was starting to grow. And I was understaffed at the time, so needed to get some more capacity into my life. So that's why I stepped away last time around. I sort of feel I may or may not have the capacity this time around, but we'll make do. And I'm just sort of feeling like I've missed it while I've been away. It's been great being part of the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee, but that committee doesn't have many decision-making powers as such. Makes recommendations back to full council. And I sort of thought, well, looking at the last 3 years and the performance of council, not that it's all been bad, but there's been some challenges. Well, might be a good time to get involved again, and I sort of feel like I can again now. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay. And do you feel like some of the recommendations that the committee made were heard well and acted upon in the way that you wanted them to be?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a pretty high-level committee, the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee. It only meets quarterly. Generally sit with a pretty massive agenda to try to get through in a couple of hours. So yeah, and it's, I guess, not being part of council. The thing I missed the most the last 3 years trying to stay up to date on that committee, I guess, is staying across all the detail. When you're a councillor, your emails every day, workshops every week, regular meetings, committee meetings and stuff like that. I sort of felt like the information flow was much, much greater in that capacity. I find you're sort of playing catch up a bit now that I'm out of that, sort of out of the room per se. So yeah, I mean, the role of that committee, I suppose, is to oversee policies and procedures, stay sort of across the higher level risks that the organisation faces, and kind of just try to make sure that what council's doing is best practice with other councils and stuff around the country or around the district. So yeah, I mean, I think that that committee has been, it's certainly acted in or within the terms of engagement that it sits on, I think. But yeah, as I say, I would probably like to be a little bit more involved in the real decision making. That's a step beyond that committee.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the you behind rather than the kind of committees or the politics of it. Each of us bring a worldview with us, and also kind of political views as well. So I'm not asking for how you vote, but I'm interested in people's life experience and not telling me I know your job role, but what world view do you kind of use to kind of navigate the world? Like or any political theories that you kind of believe in? How do you navigate the world? What's important to you?
Yeah, another very good question. So I grew up on a sheep and beef farm in eastern Southland. Fourth generation farming family into New Zealand. Very, very traditional. On second born son, so the farm was always going to go to my older brother. That sort of traditional farming family, and sort of grew up through that period of time where young men don't really deal with emotions or that sort of thing. I guess there was a pretty entrenched stereotypical view that still probably exists today through a lot of the generations that are still in that part of the world, this part of the world even. I was privileged enough to be able to travel for the best part of 13 years. I spent 7 years in the Caribbean and 5 years in South Africa. And I think I came home not just with a South African wife who I love, but a much better worldview, as you say, and a much more open mind as to what's great about New Zealand, what's great about where we live, and just being way more acceptive of everybody, different nationalities, creeds, sexual orientation, all that sort of stuff that I probably wasn't well rounded with when I left school coming out of Gore. But I think that I certainly bring that to the table now, and it serves me well.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's really great to ask that question because people interpret it in different ways, and I think it tells a lot about someone's life, right, in terms of how they view decision making, how they navigate it, and also because our community is highly international. We have probably 60 different ethnicities living here. We're very multicultural. There's different ways of doing things, and we're just a very changing community, right?
That's why I ended up back here and not in Gore.
Okay, so you're not standing for the Gore Council as well?
No, they've got their own challenges they're trying to work through. I think this next term will be a bit better for them down there, but
yeah. Okay, so like when we come to decision making at council, we have to go through a kind of deliberative process, and I've talked a lot about that in this podcast because as much as actual skills that we use in our career path are very, very important, I think the way that we deliberate is also really important. So I don't know if you can kind of speak to either the process or your experience of how you've found that and how you navigate that process. We may have different information that's conflicting information. We might have legislation that brings in a different perspective and steers us in a direction that's different than what our community wants. So I guess you could land on something like, have you ever been in a position where you completely changed your mind on something, or how do you deliberate and what informs you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'd like to think that I bring a genuine open-mindedness to the table. When I think back to that first term on council, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I mean, the first 18 months or so, you're basically playing catch up, just trying to understand what exactly it is that you're supposed to be doing, all the things that council actually does. For me, that was a massive eye-opener, like how much actually council is across in all of the everyday things that we're doing. I thought it was, water and rubbish, but I mean, it's so much more than that. So then once you're sort of just trying to catch up with that, you've got all this information coming at you, like I found it very, very hard to make decisions or to sort of step back and take a look with like a fresh set of eyes and say, what am I looking at here and how do I make a decision? Obviously, after you get used to that a little bit, that becomes a little bit easier. But then for me, on top of that, it was the relationships that you sort of started to build with the other councillors around the table, the conversations that you'd have with them. Yeah, obviously, like, although I say I'm open-minded, I've probably got some biases in some different places where I think one thing's important that's potentially not important, not as important, or is maybe not a full reflection of community views. So yeah, I guess just listening and having those conversations, letting somebody like make their point, and then yeah, taking the time to put some common sense across that and say, does that make sense? And yeah, I'm more than happy to put my hand up and say I've made a mistake, and I'm more than happy to say, I'm not married to an idea, I'm not married to an opinion, and I'm happy to change those if they make sense.
Sure. Okay. And so what role do you think ego plays in politics, if any? If I think about just scoping out wide and thinking about some of the big players in global politics, there's certainly some egos out there. Do you think that
like who? Esther, like who?
Pardon?
Like who? I can't think of anybody. Not joking.
So I guess does ego help or hinder in your view, and do you have an ego?
I think one of the strengths I have is that I am not as egotistical as some others. Like I say, I'm pretty happy to change my mind if it's the right thing to do. When I try to think about my ego, I can't quite define it, so I'm not sure if it's that important to me.
Okay. It's hard, right? Because I suppose when we ask that question, I've had no context behind it. But I think an ego is potentially, if we think about political players out there, it's a something that they're attached to in terms of how they're valued by the majority, or how they're valued from the outside. So I've reflected on my ego. I think we all have one. I think that one of my strengths is that I can see all sides of things. And I think it's also one of my weaknesses, because I then end up being quite indecisive, because I actually can see all sides of it, and then I feel quite lost in terms of which direction to go. So I think if I think about my ego, I'm probably attached to the idea that I would like people to think that I'm quite balanced in terms of my thinking. They might not have that view of me, but that's probably what I'm attached to, So the reason I ask it is because I think when we see people's behaviour, we start to see elements of maybe how their ego plays out, So,
and I kind of probably agree with that statement. I think if I did have a strong ego or had a sense of ego like that, making decisions would be easy, right? Because it would be ingrained in you. True. And I'm probably with you a little bit. I do find at times it's hard to make the right decision, or hard to make a difficult decision that may not be in line with some expectations. Maybe if it helps, I was once upon a time shopping for a new wheelbarrow with my 2-year-old daughter at the time, and I was going to buy the black one, obviously, and she said, "Dad, get the pink one." So I bought a pink wheelbarrow, and it sat outside my house, and so many people that have commented on that pink wheelbarrow, and I turned up to a working day at my gun club with it once upon a time, and everyone made comments, and I don't know if that's ego or not, but like that sort of thing, like I don't really care that I've got a pink wheelbarrow if that made my daughter happy that day. So yeah,
it's quite a nice metaphor. I like that. It's a good story.
yeah.
So you're one of 12 councillors. So if we think about our ability as councillors to be able to influence, we can do that in different ways. We can do it procedurally through our decision making. We can potentially do it with who we align ourselves with. We can do it with representing our community. So the two parts of this question is, one, I guess, how do you see yourself influencing things? And the second part of the question is, what are you looking for in a mayor? What qualities? So we're going to, we've got different candidates standing for mayor, and what qualities do you think are going to be really important for you to be able to work well with that person?
Okay, so just to answer the first part of that question, so how do I feel I could have some influence in there? So again, looking or thinking back about my first term and when I was deciding to maybe get back in the ring now, again, that was something I didn't really understand, was how you actually, like, everybody says, oh, I'll stand for council. I'm not happy with something. I'll stand for council and I'll change everything. It'll be so easy. And you realise pretty quickly that, actually affecting change, partially because you're only one of 12 around the table, right? And all those people are representing different individual views and different community views, potentially. So it took me a long time to realise that to make any changes, again, it comes back to relationships, comes back to talking to those councillors. If you've got something that's very near and dear to your heart, or something that you do want to change, the only way to do that is to persuade your councillors to get on your side. So you need to do that by way of, some of it's procedural. It's a good thing doing. Other ways is bringing actual examples from your own community, the people that you represent. But it's about having those conversations. For the longest time before our council meetings, my phone would never ring. Like, you'd never talk to any other councillors before we'd be sitting around a table. Very, very hard to make changes and change agendas and change motions and things when you're sitting in the heat of a council meeting. So what I've kind of learned there is, it's about talking to your councillors, about getting in front of those agenda items early. It's about participating in those workshops and actually getting the staff, because again, it's the staff that bring us the agendas. And once it's in the agenda, it's quite hard to effectively change that. And you can't change it on the fly. And we tried to do that when we were talking ward boundaries and stuff like that, and it actually blew up in our face, if you remember back then. So so for me, it's about understanding that process better. It's getting probably in the ear of the ELT more so, because they drive a lot of their interpretation of what they think councillors want and whether or not it is or isn't. And again, they're trying to weigh up 12 different views. So I think it's having a good relationship with them to make sure that they are reflecting, what the councillors are saying, and having a good relationship with your councillors. Regarding the qualities, I'll be looking for in a mayor. When I was on council, Jim was the mayor, and what I really, really liked about Jim, especially the term before we got in there, and Scott Stevens, when he asked me if I'd be willing to stand for council, one of the big things that drove me to that decision then was the ability of that council to actually get things done. Not saying this council the last 3 years hasn't got anything done, but I sort of felt like when I was on council for that 3 years, we got far less done. It felt like we did go through COVID, which was a bit of a challenge. But it's about getting things done. It's about, cutting through the bureaucracy and actually, moving on with things. Case in point, we're talking about a new civic centre somewhere, and we're relying on a 2017 community engagement piece. That's got to be out of date by now, right? But that's how long things take. Like, everything just takes so long. So having a mayor that can get things done, very, very important to me. And again, somebody with some good leadership skills, I suppose. Again, coming back to that relationships, you've got to have relationships. You've got to have a cohesive team. Yes, you can have different opinions and different different ways or wants and needs and stuff, but eventually everybody has got to work as a team, or nothing will get done.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So there's quite a lot in that conversation that we just had, and different things that we could touch on. You mentioned consultation and the length of time. I think we have kind of legacy issues. We have what's often at the moment called kicking the can down the road. Sometimes it's appropriate to kick the can down the road. One of the reasons that, for example, I kicked the can down the road with Project Manawar, which is the civic centre, and the council officers, was for the very reason that our consultation was from 2017, and we felt like the whole world had changed since then, and it was no longer appropriate to lean on that. So it is a challenge, isn't it? Because sometimes it's better, I think, to just stop and pause. And it may be to relitigate something, which is really frustrating for staff because they've had a direction. And so we see this tension sometimes between what governance is trying to direct and what ERT has previously been told that the direction that they should be working towards. So we often see in our media about governance isn't directing. Well, sometimes it is, but it's from quite some time ago, right? So let's just maybe have a quick question on governance. What does good governance look like for you? Because there's been a lot of discussion about what poor governance is. What does that look like for you? And maybe not just you, like, don't think it's not, I don't want to make it so hard that it's just about you, but in terms of like good practice and what a good governance structure should look like and what you would like to see happen in this next term.
Yeah, so I'll assume you're asking that question from a local government, from a council perspective, not from a private perspective, because governance in the private realm and governance in the public realm are actually they should be one and the same-ish, but they just can't be, right? Because private has different levers and different objectives to try to achieve. So yeah, good governance in local government again comes down to a cohesive, good team around the governance table, I'd say, that understand each other, that respect each other, and can give good direction. I mean, technically governance should stand above operations. It should direct the ship, but it shouldn't steer it. Or it should navigate the path, but it shouldn't be turning the wheel, and I think it's been quite difficult because there's been so many polarizing opinions around the council table of late. It is quite hard to get governance in the same space. And a case in point, I suppose, is so for me, good governance at the council level is that you sit around and you have the debate, and when the decision is made, you support that decision, whether you agreed with it or not. And then, I suppose it also comes down to like an understanding. Like when I first got on to council, and you're sitting there and you're looking at agenda items for infrastructure spend, and it's going to be 30+ million and stuff like that. I'm not qualified to make those calls. How would I know? I'm relying on operations to bring me the right information on that. But then I'm relying on my skill set to sit there and say, well, is there anything I see in here that doesn't make sense, that I need to ask some more questions on? That is, one way or another. So it's quite hard to say, well, how far do you go down that before you start trusting people at the operations level? And then I suppose the next point to that is, if it all goes wrong, whose head is it? Who's on the block? And in the public space, that doesn't really happen to anybody. That probably falls back on the councillors a bit. But also, I mean, looking around, with all respect to all the councillors I work with, like, if I was feeling unqualified for a whole heap of that stuff, like, I don't know how a lot of the other people were sitting around the table comfortably making decisions on, tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure spend, hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure spend based on the information that we had,
Yeah, thank you. And I think, something that I've advocated for since 4 years I've been there is around professional development for governance. And why we wouldn't invest in it is beyond me, because we have people from all walks of life, which doesn't mean that they don't have good skill sets, but it means that we can build our governance capability, as any board should, and in the private sector do all the time, but in the public sector don't seem to as much. So I think there's huge opportunity around that aspect as well. But yeah, thank you. You made some really good points. So I think we're probably coming towards the end of our conversation. So maybe is there any kind of parting comments or anything that you want to leave listeners thinking about, or anything that you wanted to say?
No, just that I'm looking forward to the campaign. I think it's going to be fun. Obviously, I hope that my name will be there come election day. And yeah, would really love to have the opportunity again to represent our community. I think I'll do an even better job this time than I did last time, hopefully. But no, and looking forward to seeing who else might be around the table at the same time.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for standing, and thanks for your time today. It's great to talk to you.
No, awesome. Thanks, Esther.